Good day, good afternoon, Bangladesh and Asia. Good day, Canada, and welcome to our regular webinar. Today we will be covering our general topic on study to Canada and how to do this right. This is our first webinar on the huge set of topics on the study to Canada. So today we will be covering very general programs. Please follow up us closely because in the future we would be discussing particulars on colleges, universities, schools, and language courses, etc. So our 30 minutes today would be dedicated specifically to general topic on study in Canada, where and what to put attention to, and how to do that correctly. Now, this is the quick agenda for today. For those who don't know us yet, I would spend a couple of minutes covering who we are, what we do, and why we're specifically focused on Asia. Then we would go to the quick facts about education in our country, what's in it for you, why studying in Canada, why it might be important and beneficial for you, what would be the general factors to consider when you're planning your education, apparently how much it could cost you, and last but not least, I would share our contact so you could come up with your questions directly to us and to our respectful partners in Bangladesh. Now, as I promised, a little bit about us. So we are established in 1999 in Toronto. We got two offices here in Toronto and in Markham. Our company works specifically with immigration only. We're focused working on visas, immigration, study visas, work permits, business immigration, provincial and federal immigration to our country. Over those years, we had about 8,400 successful visa cases, which of course includes the study visas as well. All of our personnel is fully licensed. That was our previous seminar was dedicated to how to distinguish and understand the difference between licensed and fraudulent consultants. Each and every one of us has at least 10 years of immigration practice. So trust us, we know the topic really deep, and please come up with the questions. Make sure that we know how to answer that. Now, a little bit about education in Canada in general. Quite interestingly, out of the top 100 universities in the world, there are 3 countries present only, which is Canada, obviously, United Kingdom, and United States. However, out of these 3 countries, with accordance to the United Nations report as of 2012, Canada is the only country with a steadily rising year-over-year educational rating. What's in it for you? Technically, with accordance to the same report, it means that if Canada would continue spending the same percentage of its GDP year-over-year to education, we would have a situation when Canada would be country number 1 with the higher education in the world by 2030. As of 2013, you can read that on a slide, that Canada is the only country in the world which diplomas are universally accepted everywhere, like absolutely 100% in every country in the world. Now, getting on further, there are only about 220 private schools in Canada, which includes boarding schools, of course. Roughly about 180 colleges and 80 universities in our country. Again, what's in it for you? With such a small percentage of educational institutions, of licensed educational institutions in our country, it means that the level of study of knowledge you would receive in those academic institutions would be extremely high compared even to other southern border neighbors. Study programs in our country, apparently they vary from several months, say, to a couple years to a few years, and they're all delivered either in English and French or in both. The minimum language requirement to be admitted to such an academic institution would be IELTS 5.5. We're speaking about IELTS academic specifically here, or its equivalent, for example, TOEFL. Why studying in Canada? What would be beneficial for you? First and foremost, guys, it's much cheaper than education in other English-speaking Western countries. It's much cheaper than tuition in the States. It's definitely much cheaper than education in the United Kingdom. And last but not least, that's what 90% of people are coming here for. Education in Canada gives you a chance to immigrate, to bring your family in, to do that absolutely legally. Meanwhile, you're studying, you're allowed to work, you're allowed to earn your and build your relationship with the employer. You're allowed to build your foundation of the future life in Canada. There is no country in the world which would openly allow you to stay, to live, to start your living in Canada with the simple education or with the, say, simple 1 year college in our country. Going on further, here are a few factors to consider if you're planning your education in Canada. Your previous education and work experience. To put it simple, guys, your study program apparently should be in line with your academic and professional background. Why is important? Your whole life you were or an IT specialist would not be smart to apply for, let's say, HR management. Obvious enough, but still lots and lots of candidates do not understand this simple fact, right? I always recommend that if you have any doubts, if you have any concerns, A, use the simple logic, B, come to the licensed and experienced consultants who understand not only the facts about universities and colleges, not only the programs which are available in there, but could align those programs to your background, right? Be they one, right? Visa officer who would be considering your study permit to understand clearly, by the way, same as you, why you're coming to study in Canada, right? It's not for the sake of immigration, it is for the sake of enhancing your work experience, making it better, and apparently your legal consultants, your legal immigration representative, the experienced one, could help you with that. Next factor, choosing an educational institution. There are lots and lots of quote-to-quote colleges located down the road, and out of those college names, there's nothing in there. It has to be the designated learning institution. Two reasons for it. Reason number one, chances of your visa success would be probably higher aligned to the institution which is acknowledged and accepted by our government. Reason number two, you would be allowed to work if only if your institution is the designated one. Right? You would not be allowed to stay, to receive the work permit, to build your immigration foundation if you were studying at a whatever college which has no license and no acknowledgement from our government. Cost of studies. Well, this is my probably favorite. When it comes to the cost of studies, there are quite a few factors to consider. We would repeat them in a while, but lots and lots of provinces, especially like Manitoba, Saskatchewan, are trying to attract students. I mean, educational institutions in such provinces, of course, are trying to attract students by the lower tuition fees. However, when it comes to the final bill, when you are admitted and you're planning to apply for the study permit, suddenly you would realize that the number in your bill would be different. Why is that? Well, because some colleges do include books, gym, and other supplementary bills in their final price, others don't. Say you might find an educational institution where it says that the tuition fees is just 10,000 Canadian dollars, and at the same time your final bill would cost, say, 14,000. Why is that? Well, because there are mandatory fees. Even though you might not be using a gym, you would still have to pay around $100 for it. Even though maybe you won't need student services, but as an international student, you would still have to pay them. Therefore, I would strongly recommend you to compare apples to apples and understand your bill way in advance and your cost of studies, making sure that the numbers you're talking about is the full one. Again, who can help you with that? My personal opinion, I would strongly recommend you coming to the licensed consultants. Make sure that they have ICCRC designation. Make sure that people you're talking to have their office in Canada and they do understand what they're talking about. Going on further, entry requirements. Now, this particular, I would say, would depend on specific programs such as nursing, law, engineering, or if we're talking about universities, say the GDP, the accumulated grades from your school, from your previous educational institution, should absolutely and entirely satisfy the admission department of a university or of a college. If not, there's usually a chance, say, to take additional classes, additional credits, or to pass an exam. For example, a couple of colleges here in Toronto, for their math programs, they require the previous test, which could be conducted in Asia as well, which could be conducted online, or they give you the admission letter. However, in that letter, they would mention to the officer that upon your arrival, you would have to take the additional math test. Nothing to worry about, but again, this is something you should be paying serious attention to. And I would be getting over and over to this again. Come to the people who understand what's going on, what they are doing, right? This is your insurance, if you will, which would allow you to protect and guarantee that your visa would not be rejected easily, right? It's your documents, of course, and it's understanding why you're applying it for and who you're working for. Registration procedures and policies, right? Again, this is the factor which people usually don't pay much attention to. However, the realization could be really painful. Typical example, you're applying for a visa, say 3 weeks is left before the study starts. Suddenly you realize that probably your visa won't be issued by the time. Does not necessarily mean it would be denied, right? But it could be a little bit of delayed. Say it's September coming, lots of people are coming to study in Canada. That's the probably biggest intake, and visa office is not able to finalize your visa application right away, right now. In such a situation, the smartest thing you can do, you could deter your studies and just ship them, say, to the next semester. Some colleges, however surprising it might sound, would charge you even a small fee, but would charge you for shifting, say, to winter or to spring. How to avoid that? How to avoid those negative consequences? And ask questions. If you're not able to do that yourself, please feel free to address your concerns, to address your questions, and discuss it with your legal representatives. Dates of intake. Well, generally in Canada, compared to the rest of the world, we have 3 intakes. That's September, the biggest one, January, another big one, and May. Some programs, they could only start in May, the others in, say, in May and September, others in winter only. And if you're hunting or looking for a specific program, that's what lots of people are doing, say, with a technical background or with a medical background, in that case, you have to plan your studies well in advance. Or, say, for whatever reason, you decided not to take the English test or admission test, absolutely, you're allowed not to do that. You could go the other path. You could instead pass the test with the college, or you could start your studies in Canada with the language classes. In that particular situation, you have to plan ahead of time your visa application, your maybe temporary resident visa and study permit, in order not to be in a situation when, say, your language studies are over and your next academic intake is in half of a year and you're not allowed to work and you have no idea what to do in Canada. Now, how much does it cost? Remember, a few minutes ago, we were talking about the tuition fees. Now, it all comes to a few expenses which you have to keep up in your mind when you're planning and preparing your budget for your studies in Canada. Apparently, tuition fees. Make sure that you understand the final number, that you crunch the numbers and exactly know what we're talking about. It's not only tuition, it's books, it's accommodation, everything. Now, Tuition fees are usually separated from admission fees. Admission fees is something the college or university takes from you for considering your application. They could vary from 0 to say 300 or 400 Canadian dollars, depending on academic institution you're applying for. Textbook and materials, they could be quite expensive, right? Well, when it comes to textbook and materials, it's my personal opinion, but I would probably stay away from the new books, purchasing them at the university, where you might easily end up paying 100, 150, or even $200 per book, because those tuition materials are quite expensive. Whilst you can purchase the used ones from your future colleagues and future students and peers, usually it could cost you like $30, $40, but still you have to budget it well. Trust me, graduating from a college or university or even a school in Canada is absolutely impossible if you do not have textbooks. Now, visa application fees, of course, that's something to consider. That could include the fees of your legal representative. It could include the government fees for considering your application. It should, of course, include the fees, if necessary, of sending the hard copy of your documents from and to Canada. Travel expenses. Airline tickets are getting more and more expensive, so that could be a big chunk of it. And apparently, living expenses in Canada. For the living expenses in Canada, there is no general chart which would tell you how much it would cost to live in there. It depends on each and every particular person. Say you could come here and buy a new car in a couple of days. Apparently, your living expenses would high rocket. At the same time, you could, even on the CIC website, find basic guidelines on how to plan and how to budget your living expenses while you're in Canada for one person or even for a family. Um, Speaking about the total budget, I tried to crunch the numbers for you and give you an idea of what you're looking for in terms of the tuition. And those numbers could vary dramatically depending on the province, on academic institution, but not necessarily it would cost you a fortune. Say in Canada, we're talking about the reputable colleges and the acceptable designated academic institutions. Tuition fees probably would vary anywhere from 5 to 12,000 Canadian dollars, depending on a program of your choice. Uh, since Canadian dollar right now is cheaper than the US dollar, so just for your rough understanding, we're talking about 4 to 9,000 US dollars, right? Once again, compare it to the tuition fees you might find in United Kingdom or United States. Way cheaper, way better, accepted universally, obvious choice, right? Now, important point, I just wanted to pin it up here. You are allowed to work while you are studying in Canada in an academic institution, not on language courses though, but this permission to work does not necessarily mean that you could include it in your budget before coming to Canada. I mean, apparently you would be allowed to work. No one would punish you for that if you're doing it legally, but you have to have money well in advance. You have to plan that well ahead and demonstrate it to the visa officer that you are financially viable prior to coming to Canada, right? You cannot explain it to anyone that, look, I would be earning something and out of those money I would be paying my tuition. No, it does not work. I would strongly, of course, recommend you to plan well ahead and budget your immigration. If you're planning to stay in Canada, if you're planning eventually to work towards your permanent residence in our country, you have to understand that it could be costly. Cheaper than your tuition, but still it would cost you. You would have to plan that well ahead as well. Now, what to do next is just a quick wrap up of a few thoughts and ideas which I had. If you would like to apply, say you're planning to study in our country and you would like to immediately just make the first step, First of all, submit your profile to the Visa Center. That's our partners in Bangladesh, absolutely knowledgeable people, professionals in their field. They know what they're doing, and they are in a constant communication with us. Therefore, submit your profile, your academic aspirations, your comprehensive CV and resume, which would explain who you're working as and what you're doing right now, what was your academic background, so that we could together prepare and give you a rough idea of which programs you would be looking at in our country and which ones of those are suitable for you. Discuss with us your chances and opportunities. Again, we're absolutely open. We would be absolutely glad to talk it over with you. What we are looking from you is being responsive and responsible, right? Do you understand well ahead is that if you're coming to us with the idea of studying as a florist, well, you have to have the florist background, apparently, right? You cannot be just demonstrate to us that you were a general surgeon yesterday and today you want to go to IT field, right? That would lead to one situation with a visa rejection, and apparently that's not what you're coming to us for. Prepare to come. Let us take your hand, guide you, prepare your visa application, lodge it, make it successful, pack your stuff, and we'll see you in Canada. As I mentioned a couple times today and in the previous webinars, know who you're working with. Only ICCRC legal experts, lawyers, and paralegals can guide you. Stay away from local quote-to-quote consultants who have never been in Canada, have absolutely nothing to do with it, and quite honestly, guys, I have no idea and just can't get it in my mind how a person who has nothing to do with our country and never been here and has no idea about particulars of tuition and academic institutions in our country can guide someone, right? Make sure that the person you're working with is ICCRC licensed, that the person is responsible, and the person is responsive. He or she knows what they're doing, they got the license, they are acknowledged and guided by the government of Canada. This is your insurance, and you cannot overemphasize that. That's very, very important. Now, our contacts, as I promised, my contacts, Alex Davidson at LawPoint, contacts of our colleagues at Visa Center. You could come to their office, probably set up an appointment, or just they have the open door policy, discuss it with them, give them a call. Feel free to ask questions. I'm always encouraging people, discuss your concerns, ideas, and thoughts with us. It would be our privilege to talk it over with you and help you. That's our major job, to take your hand, support, give you assistance, advise you, and eventually bring you to Canada. Thank you all again. Thank you all for joining. I do really appreciate to see that people are coming to our webinars. It's quite a pleasure for me to receive your questions after the webinar. You got our contacts. Feel free to ask, to discuss, to express your concerns and ideas. We're here to help. We are here to change the situation in Asia. We see it changing right now. Less and less so-called fraudulent consultants and immigration specialists are trying to defraud people. And this is eventually why we're in the business. This is why we're aiming to help you. Next time, we would be talking about the provincial immigration to the province of Manitoba. We would be discussing it comprehensively. Afterwards, just follow us closely. Every week on Thursday, we would be discussing different progress and different opportunities which are specifically addressed for people in Asia who want to come to our country. We would be giving hints, ideas, advices, with disclosure, lots and lots of useful information which you could apply on a daily basis when planning your coming to Canada, when planning your immigration to Canada. The more you know, the more you work towards immigration safely, correctly, the more chances that eventually you would be successful. Thank you all again for joining. It was quite a pleasure, guys. And I'm waiting for your questions. On this point, goodbye.